Hi guys, I'm Diaz and you're watching the SUV Battle channel. In this video, we are going to compare a great variety of mid-size SUVs, namely
Mitsubishi Pajero Sport of 2022, Chevrolet Trailblazer with a V6 petrol engine, the 4-liter Land Cruiser Prado, Volkswagen Touareg, Haval H9, another Prado of the 150 series, but this one has got a diesel engine, the Russian UAZ Patriot, and the Chinese BAIC BJ40 Plus. I bet you've never seen this kind of comparison ever. But that isn't all. Please subscribe to my channel and then hit the bell so you don't miss, but stay updated on the following video. In that video, we'll be testing the capabilities of the old and the new Land Rover Defender 110 using an exciting and challenging route. The American Hummer H3 and the Japanese Toyota Land Cruiser 76 will accompany these couple of Indian cars from England so that it isn't going to be draggy for them. You'll watch all this in my next video. But now, let's get back to our current participants. Given that obstacles have a different level of complexity, all participants will start driving at a lower range and further engage their off-road arsenal as needed. Mitsubishi Pajero Sport with a 3-liter V6 petrol engine is the first one to start. Its off-road arsenal has a lower range, interaxle differential lock, and rear interwheel differential lock. Moreover, there is a traction control system with an opportunity to opt for driving modes. So we're driving with the engaged lower range and the locked interaxle differential in the first run. The driving mode is rock. The Pajero Sport is positioned at its starting point, which is along the diagonal right in front of the first obstacle. Here we go. Hitting the throttle pedal, and the traction control system is getting on right away, while the suspended wheels barely made a couple of spins at a low speed. Now, we need to position it at the next starting point. The front right wheel is lifted in the air, hitting the throttle pedal a little more. Wheels are spinning slightly, and the Pajero Sport is taking the proper position. We can see the already familiar algorithm while resuming the driving. A small wheel slipping at the beginning, followed by a confident driving forward amid sounds of the brake system clamping the suspended wheels. Here, we've got a familiar sequence of actions again. A slight wheel slip at the beginning, and then all the wheels, including the hanging ones, are spinning at as much as the same speed as if the car has got its interaxle, rear and front locks engaged. The G-Wagon had the same behavior during its combat mode run, with all 3 locks engaged in the Clash of the Titans 2 video, in which the then new Toyota Land Cruiser 300 also took part. There is a link to this video in the description in the upper right corner right now. The final diagonal is another confirmation in favor of the stability of the traction control system of Mitsubishi Pajero Sport. There's a slight slipping at the beginning, followed by maximum efficiency. Let's have another run at Pajero Sport, but this time, besides the lower range and the interaxle lock, we're going to have the rear interwheel lock on. In other words, the whole off-road arsenal is engaged. Well, there is not even a hint of sleep at all right before entering the first diagonal, although we had wheels spinning idly in the previous run. So here we go, hitting the throttle pedal, and the car immediately gets moving forward. That's a good start, isn't it? When Pajero Sport is getting positioned at its starting point, it is barely slipping. Instead, it takes lower speeds to get things running, eventually making the car articulating smoother and better in terms of its predictability. There's nothing new to see again. the cars started moving immediately without any wheels spinning idly. And here, the driver hit the throttle pedal a little more and caused the wheels to fail to grip on, resulting in a small slip. But even in that case, all the wheels are rotating at the same speed, once again proving the effectiveness of the entire system. There are no difficulties on the final diagonal, even doing deliberate stops, and the Pajero Sport is finishing its run. The next participant is Haval H9, the Chinese body-on-frame SUV. This is a pre-styling option, so it has no front differential lock. There are only lower range and rear locks, and it's getting to engage its standard drive plus lower range at its first run to get over the obstacles. Haval is driving along the first diagonal, so we're backing off to resume driving after a complete stop in the required position. Please note the strange behavior. The brake lights have not yet gone out, but the rotations have already gone up. It is either a feature of the descent hold system or the driver is hitting both the brake and the throttle pedals at the same time, thus throttling up the engine and providing higher torque. However, when positioning the car at this starting point, the brake lights are no longer on when hitting the throttle pedal. But there is still a slight slipping right before the traction control system gets engaged. And right after that, Haval jumped forward and stopped above the starting point. The car started driving smoothly, but then again, the hanging wheels went spinning, and the car jumped when the traction control system got engaged, which is quite specific to it. Here's another stop. The wheels again keep rotating while standing by and before the traction control system gets turned on, which we can judge by seeing the loaded rear left wheel spinning, and after that, Haval is driving further. On the final diagonal, all wheels keep touching the ground, and eventually, the ascent is not steep. That is why Haval, though spinning, still keeps moving forward and finishing the run. Now, in addition to the lower range, we're hooking up the rear interwheel lock. So now let's see how it's going to affect Haval H9's ability to overcome difficult obstacles. The car passes the first diagonal with a barely noticeable front wheel slipping. We're arriving at the starting point, and the former nervousness with its specific jump forward was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Haval is heading forward just right away after the driver has barely touched the throttle pedal. The brake lights are on again. We can hear the revs rising, and Haval is jumping forward again. But now look how smoothly Pajero Sport is getting away by gently landing on its front left wheel. And now, let's look at how Haval H9 behaves in a similar situation. Most likely, it is due to its turbo engine's feature. Unlike Pajero Sport's atmospheric engine with a smooth torque shelf, which is in fact torque's flat plateau, the Haval's maximum torque is available in the range from 1,800 to 4,500 rotations per minute. Therefore, when the traction control system is on, the engine manages to get so many rotations that are sufficient for outputting so much torque that the car is just jumping out forward. The car's behavior is entirely predictable and almost as different from the previous run at the final part of the climb. So now let's move on to the next participant. 2020 Chevrolet Trailblazer has a 3 and 6-liter V6 petrol engine. As for the off-road arsenal, it has part-time all-wheel drive, lower range, and a limited slip differential on the rear axle. The car is driving quickly to the first diagonal, and then it fully stops. Here we go. Throttling, the hanging wheels are slipping until the LSD on its rear axle gets on and Trailblazer starts moving on. Here is the very click of engaging LSD. Note how smooth it was to position at the starting point? There is a non-intensive slip and the LSD must have been engaged most likely. Perhaps we can't hear the moment when it exactly turned on because wheels are spinning slowly and the LSD is turning on more gently. Here we go, bending the throttle, a short slip and moving forward immediately. Trailblazer has demonstrated the same behavior in this area with its front left wheel hanging out. The final diagonals again demonstrate our Chevrolet Trailblazer all-wheel drive specific operation. First of all, the free wheels are turning about once. Then LSD is hooking up and the car is driving forward right away. And these all need no high revs. The next participant is Volkswagen Touareg of 2010 with 3 and 6 liter petrol engines. Unfortunately, it isn't equipped with an off-road package that includes a lower range and a rear inter-wheel lock. But it does have an air suspension that we have lifted and the off-road driving mode. Will it be enough to master and get over our obstacles? Or will Touareg have to roll back like Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT did and eventually fail to master this climb? You will find more details in the Battle of the Titans 3 America vs. Europe video, whose link is posted in the description. It will be exciting to see how different cars behave when they are steered by the same driver driving. He drove the Touareg and has recently driven Pajero Sport twice. The car reaches the first diagonal and entirely stops with its front left wheel hanging out. Here we go. Hitting the throttle, the front wheel turns a circle at a low speed and Touareg starts heading into the primary test. When getting the car positioned at a starting point, the free wheels are also turning no more than a circle, and then followed by a confident and steady drive. Given the fact that there are only 2 wheels with reliable support, and keep in mind the existing slope, which is also adding certain hardships, we can see the same algorithm when resuming the driving. Slight rotation of the hanging out wheels, followed by the driving forward. At this same area, Touareg, with its front left wheel high up, remains uncompromised and demonstrates a stable result. Touareg is making no surprise on the climb's final part, with way more straightforward obstacles and driving steadily towards the finish and slipping on the diagonals once in a while. Note the forced cooling in operation that none of the previous participants have had. Oh, these German cars with heat-load engines. We have another Chinese SUV on the start line, the BAIC BG40 Plus. It has a 2-liter turbo petrol engine. The drive is equipped with a part-time 4-wheel drive. Unfortunately, it has only a lower range out of the off-road attributes. The car is reaching the first diagonal, although it had to spin its tires a little bit to get to the stop point. Suddenly, BJ is rolling back, though its hanging out wheels rotate forward. As soon as the traction control system is on, which is apparent when its loaded rear wheel is specifically jerked, BJ immediately starts driving forward. When getting the car positioned at the main obstacle, its wheels slipped for a while. And as soon as the driver throttled more, the car immediately jumped forward, thus demonstrating the rear wheel's action radius. We're rolling back, not to violate the event's regulations, and start driving with the right front wheel up. Just like Haval, the BJ40 gets a move on quickly from this position. Further, out at the exit point, there is a slight slip until the traction control system gets engaged. However, on a series of diagonal hangings in the final part of the climb, Pay attention to the smoothness of overcoming obstacles. The wheels slip at low speed until the traction control system gets on and follows by the steady driving forward. These habits are typical for cars with atmospheric engines. Still, we do remember that in complicated situations, if you overdo it with the throttle pedal, the BJ40 can quickly jump out a little further than you expect from it. The next participant is the Toyota Land Cruiser Prado of 2018 with a 4-liter V6 petrol engine. This car has the following off-road arsenal: a lower range, an interaxle lock, and a limited slip differential on its rear axle. Prado is heading to the main starting point so confidently that it drove by the first diagonal. Therefore, we're rolling back not to break the sequence of overcoming the obstacle course. Here we go. Hitting the throttle pedal, and the traction control system clamps the front wheel before it even turns half a circle, and the car starts moving right away. When getting the car positioned at the starting point, the hanging out wheel is spinning and getting faster along with raising revs, but things are going as smoothly as possible. But when resuming the driving, there is amazing stuff happening. The hanging out front wheel is actively rotating when hitting the throttle pedal, while the free rear wheel is almost not rotating. Most likely, this is due to the free interaxle differential. Starting from this position, Toyota is slipping at the beginning, and this is by no means the best result based on what we saw today. Look at the front wheel and recall Pajero's sports behavior at the same place. I do not know why, but the Prado goes further without any diagonal hangings. So either it has too long of a wheel travel and wheels always have tight contact with the ground, or it rides along some alternative trajectory. Fortunately, we have another run in which we will add an interaxle lock to the engaged lower range. This run was not exceptional, and Prado passes by the stop point on the first diagonal again. There is a slight slip at the start, and we are heading for the main obstacle. This time, both hanging out wheels are rotating the same way, but due to active slippage and excessive throttling, Prado is not hitting the starting point. Therefore, rolling back to take the correct position. Throttling smoothly, and Prado is gently crawling up and again fails, hanging the front left wheel out. I've purposely checked the trajectory of the movement, and it differs from the driveways of other participants. Moreover, it differs not only at the exit from the main obstacle, but also on a series of diagonals in the final part of the distance. Unfortunately, it was not that obvious at the time of filming, and I found it out only at the time of writing this text, having watched the passage from all 3 cameras. The next participant. Another Prado, but it is a 2020, and with 2 and 8-liter turbo diesel engines this time. It has the following off-road arsenal: a lower range, interaxle, and rear inter-wheel lock. But first, let's see how it will be driving with the engaged lower range. The car is reaching the first diagonal, stops, and starts moving. The free wheels are making several low-speed rotations before the traction control system figures out what needs to be done, and Prado keeps going on. When getting the car positioned at the main obstacle, we can see a more intense slip, which is why the diesel Prado, the same as the previous participant, drives further and falls with the front right wheel. We're rolling back to get to the starting point. Throttling, and the rear left wheel is actively slipping, while the front hanging out wheel is almost not rotating. But further, it is visible how the traction control system clamps the rear wheel, and the car's driving forward. And again, there is a familiar situation. Prado is heading to the finish without lifting the front wheel or any other diagonal hangings. Another run of the diesel Prado, but this time in the entire combat mode. The lower range, interaxle, and rear interwheel locks are engaged. Having reached and stopped on the first diagonal, Prado is not even hinting at a slip when throttling. Instead, the car is just driving forward despite the rear wheel stretched to the maximum travel. Look how sensitive the driver is in controlling the car from the first attempt by positioning it on the starting point of the main obstacle. Again, there is a significant difference from the previous run. Here we go. Throttling. All wheels are rotating at the same speed without any slip. Stable movement throughout the entire route. Although in the previous video, G-Wagon and Land Rover Defender were hanging out there. I don't know how come the trajectory was lost right on Prado and both gasoline and diesel engines. Although, I'm sure evil tongues will say that I did this on purpose and all this test for the sake of advertising Toyota Land Cruiser Prado. And they will be right. After all, this is the worst selling car among the test participants, and it needs advertising like no other. Okay, a lark's a lark. The next participant. And now, we have reached the final participant, UAZ Patriot with petrol 2 and 7 and an automatic transmission. It has a part-time all-wheel drive, a lower range, and off-road driving mode, and we'll engage it in the second run. And in the first one, we will go on a lower range. By the way, that's the reason why UAZ turned out to be trailing. Beefy off-road tires of the MT category. The car reaches the first diagonal, stops, slips when throttling, and continues climbing. When positioning UAZ at the starting point, the driver had to throttle more and the wheels rotated a little more intensively. And the specific swinging of the entire car body was also clearly visible. It was also on the first diagonal, although it was not so apparent to the eye. But despite this, Patriot stopped in the right place, demonstrating the length of the front wheel travel. Throttling, the hanging out wheels are slipping and adding a little more revs, and the UAZ is jumping forward. We're rolling back, stopping with the rear left wheel hanging out. The traction control system takes some time to react, and if one doesn't make a toy of the throttle pedal, the Patriot will carefully overcome obstacles without scaring the driver with sharp jumps forward. And here's the same position that was enough for me when we had driveways of both Prados. And look at how the UAZ traction control system works. The front wheel is not rotating idle even when it is entirely in the air. Miraculously, UAZ finds a diagonal that both Prados did not have. Patriot is skidding a little at low speed while waiting for the traction control system, and then it is going ahead and finishing the run. Now, we're engaging the off-road driving mode. I wonder how the behavior of Patriots will change when overcoming the obstacle course. But if judging based on the engine sound, it seems that the car is driving at higher revs. Stopping on the first diagonal, releasing the brake pedal, rolling back a little, and the Patriot is driving forward after the usual slip. When positioning at the starting point, UAZ is slipping with the front wheels turned out. But as soon as the driver put the wheels straight, the Patriot dutifully drove forward. Or, it's the usual UAZ algorithm. First, we slip a little, and then we go. Whenever the driver releases the brake pedal, the car rolls back. Probably that's why, by willing to fix the situation, one instinctively wants to bend the throttle pedal harder, which is why UAZ jumps out forward. We're rolling back again, having positioned Patriot with the rear left wheel hanging out. Here we go, throttling, and I don't see much difference in the car's behavior compared to the previous run without engaging any off-road mode. There is nothing new on this site, slipping at the very beginning and followed by driving forward. The same thing is observed on the final diagonal almost at the finish of the run.
Well, you have watched the driveways of 8 cars, so it's time to summarize and make a traditional arrangement in places.
The 5th place, UAZ Patriot. It had the longest slip, plus the car body swinging during this very slip. But it would help if you considered that Patriot has the weakest engine and has to spin up to more extensive rotations to provide the loaded wheels with enough torque. Plus, there was a version without a rear lock on the test. For sure, having that one UAZ would have shown a completely different result. The 4th place, BAIC BJ40 Plus and 4-liter Toyota Land Cruiser Prado. They both actively slipped during the positioning and when exiting from the main obstacle. Because of this, the drivers could not drive the car properly and both drove over the starting point. The 3rd place, Chevrolet Trailblazer. While overcoming obstacles, it slipped significantly less than that of the Patriot, BJ40, and petrol Prado. Plus, it has a factory LSD on the rear axle, affecting Trailblazer's ability to overcome obstacles. And thanks to the powerful engine, it does not have to raise the revs much, which is why the wheels do not spin at high speed, so everything goes smoothly and predictably. The 2nd place, the Haval H9 and diesel Prado with rear lock. In normal mode, in other words, having engaged only lower range, Haval drove even worse than Trailblazer, slipping a lot on diagonals and jumping forward, raising revs. But as soon as the rear inter-wheel lock was hooked up, the slippage almost disappeared. But the car's tendency to jerk forward has not gone away. And I am sure that Haval H9 with a front lock will have the same behavior, since these same jumps are due to the peculiarity of small volume turbocharged engines. The turbo diesel Prado perfectly drove through all obstacles, engaging the rear inter-wheel lock. And by judging that driveway, he could reasonably claim the 1st place. But recall how it slipped without a rear lock. For this reason, it is in 2nd place, since there is a car that showed a better result without a rear lock. We move on to the 1st place. In 1st place, Mitsubishi Pajero Sport. I like the way it drove in the 1st run, although there were slips, an attentive traction control system promptly stopped them. And when the rear inter-wheel lock was added, then in certain difficult situations, Pajero Sport had all the wheels rotating at the same speed as if it had 3 mechanical locks like the G-Wagon has. An excellent performance and a well-deserved 1st place. And of course, I didn't forget about Volkswagen Touareg. Having no special off-road arsenal, I remind you that they came with a lower range and rear inter-wheel lock. Only due to an effective traction control system, Touareg drove the entire obstacle course better than traditional frame SUVs. And that's why it also shares 1st place. Just do not write about the monumentality of the classic frame structure and the enormous margin of safety tested by thousands of kilometers off-road. No one argues with this. Instead, the purpose of this video is to show the capabilities of cars to overcome difficult obstacles. As you can see for yourself, it is in the discipline that Volkswagen Touareg will quickly give a head start to real SUVs.
And that's it for me. Be sure to write which car surprised you and from which one you expected more. I'm Diz, see you in the next video.